Here's something nobody wants to tell you, so I will. Most people will die broke, not because they didn't have the chance, but because they refused to change while the chance was still standing in front of them. That's the truth. Not a nice truth, but a useful one. And I'd rather give you a useful truth than a nice lie. Somewhere out there tonight, there's a person working just as hard as you, maybe harder, and going absolutely nowhere. And somewhere else, there's a person working smart, working with a plan, and their life is multiplying. Same 24 hours, same planet, same set of laws governing both of them. So what's the difference? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Why most people never become wealthy and happy. Not because life didn't give them a chance. Life gives everybody a chance. The problem is what they did or didn't do with it. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if it's just to yourself. If your bank account is a reflection of your habits and your happiness is a reflection of your choices, are you proud of what's being reflected back? Most people, if they're honest, would say no. And here's the part that stings a little. It's not because they're unlucky. It's not because the system is rigged, though people love to say that. It's because somewhere along the way, they made peace with less. They call it being realistic. I call it a slow surrender. And a slow surrender doesn't feel like defeat while it's happening. It feels like comfort. It feels like Friday night and a paycheck and a little bit of relief. But relief is not the same as progress. Relief is temporary. Progress compounds. Now here's the first law, and I want you to lock this one into your memory because everything else builds on it. It's called the law of use. Whatever you don't use, you lose. It's not punishment, it's just physics applied to a human life. If you stop using a muscle, it weakens. If you stop using your mind, it dulls. If you stop using your ambition, it shrinks. Nobody takes a vote on it. Nobody sends you a notice. It just happens quietly, the way rust happens, the way a garden grows weeds when nobody's tending it. Most people are sitting on talent they haven't touched in years, ideas they never wrote down, skills they let go stale, ambition they buried under bills and Netflix, and the excuse that they're too tired. And every day that talent sits there unused, it doesn't just wait patiently for you, it shrinks. So the question I'd ask you tonight is simple. What have you got that you're not using? Because whatever it is, it's dying a little every single day you leave it alone. Let me tell you a story, an old one, but it still cuts straight to the point. A man was going on a long journey, and before he left, he called in 3 of his workers. To the first, he gave 5 measures of gold. To the second, 2. To the third, just 1. Then he left. Now the first worker took his 5 and put them to work, took some risks, made some moves, and by the time the master came home, his 5 had become 10. The second did the same thing with his 2 and turned it into 4. But the third man, the one who was given just 1 measure, he did something different. He took that single measure, wrapped it up carefully, dug a hole in the ground, and buried it. Safe, untouched, unused. When the master came back and asked what happened, that third man proudly said, "I didn't lose it. Here it is, exactly as you gave it to me." And you'd think that would be good news. But the master wasn't pleased, or not even a little, because the point was never to protect it. The point was to use it. And that's most people's whole financial life and most people's whole emotional life summed up in one story. They're not losing what they were given. They're just burying it out of fear, out of comfort, out of the belief that if they don't risk it, they can't fail. But here's what nobody tells that third man. Not failing is not the same as succeeding. Standing still is not safety. Standing still is just a slower way of falling behind. Now here's the second law, and this one might be the most important one you hear all year. It's the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever you reap is what you sowed. Simple sentence. Enormous consequences. If you don't like your harvest, financially, emotionally, in your relationships, in your health, don't look at the world. Look at what you planted. And I know that's not comfortable to hear because it's much easier to blame the economy, blame your boss, blame your parents, blame bad luck. But the moment you blame something outside yourself, you hand over your power to change it. The moment you say, "This is my harvest because of what I planted," suddenly you're back in control because you can always plant differently tomorrow. But here's what most people miss about this law, and it's the exciting part. You don't reap what you sow. You reap far more than what you sow. One seed doesn't become one seed back. It becomes a stalk with dozens, sometimes hundreds of seeds on it. That's true of an apple tree, and it's true of a bad habit, and it's true of a good one. Small negative choices repeated daily don't just cost you a little. They compound into something much bigger than the choice itself. And small positive choices repeated daily, the ones that look almost too small to matter, an extra hour of study, an extra sales call, an extra chapter read, an extra kind word spoken, those compound into a life that looks nothing like where you started. That's the part most people never grasp. They're waiting for one big moment, one lucky break, one lottery ticket, when the truth is sitting quietly in the small, boring, repeated choices they make every single day without noticing. And anyone can sow. That's the beautiful, almost unfair truth about this law. It doesn't ask where you were born, what your accent sounds like, what your bank account says right now. It only asks if you're willing to plant. The question was never can you. The question is will you. 10 years from now, you are going to arrive somewhere, whether you plan it or not. The only real question is whether you decide the direction or whether you let drift decide it for you. Most people let drift decide. That's the tragedy. Not that they couldn't have chosen a better direction, but that they never even realized they were choosing at all. Now let's talk about why so many people stay stuck, because it's not what you think. It's rarely one giant mistake that ruins a life. It's a series of small, easily excused mistakes that pile up so quietly the person doesn't notice until years have gone by. Skipping the book because the show's more interesting tonight. Putting off the hard conversation because it's uncomfortable. Spending the extra dollar because it's just $1. None of these choices on their own seem dangerous. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. A single mistake rarely ruins you. 1,000 small ones repeated for years absolutely will. This is what I call the error of doing what's easy instead of what's necessary. Easy and necessary are rarely the same thing. And most people spend their whole lives chasing easy, wondering why necessary never happened to them. Here's the third law I want to give you tonight. And it's one that changes how you see time itself. It's the law of accumulation. Great successes are not created in one dramatic moment. They're accumulated brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice, until one day the world looks at your life and calls it an overnight success when you know good and well it took years. Wealth is accumulated. Wisdom is accumulated. Skill is accumulated. Trust is accumulated. And on the flip side, so is debt, so is regret, so is bitterness, so is a wasted decade. Accumulation doesn't ask permission and it doesn't take sides. It just keeps adding up whatever you keep feeding it. So here's the question worth asking every single evening. What did I add to my pile today? Or did I add a brick to the life I say I want? Or did I add a brick to the excuse I keep making for why I don't have it yet? Now I want to be fair with you, because a full truth is better than a half one. There is a law worth admitting about all of this, and it's this. Sometimes you do everything right and you still lose. That's part of the deal. That's part of the last several thousand years of human experience. Opportunity has always come mixed with difficulty, and it always will. Anybody promising you a version of success with no setbacks, no losses, no bad seasons is selling you a fantasy, not a philosophy. So don't get bitter when a storm hits, even after you've done the planning right. Expect it or prepare for it. But don't let it convince you the whole system is broken, because it isn't. It's just honest about the fact that not every season is a harvest season. And here's what separates the people who make it from the people who don't. It's not that the successful ones never got hit by a bad season. Everybody gets hit. It's that they didn't use the bad season as proof they should quit sowing altogether. They kept planting through the difficulty, because a bad season is temporary, but an empty field is a choice. Let's talk about happiness for a moment, because people separate wealth and happiness like they're opposites, and they're not. They're built from the same foundation, which is the willingness to grow. Most unhappy people aren't unhappy because life handed them a bad deck. They're unhappy because they stopped growing. They got comfortable. They stopped reaching. And a human being who isn't reaching for anything slowly loses their spark, no matter how nice their circumstances look on the outside. I've met people with plenty of money who are miserable because they mistook accumulation of things for growth of self. And I've met people with very little who were deeply content because they were becoming more, learning more, giving more every single week of their lives. Happiness was never about the size of the pile. It's about the direction of the person building it. Are you becoming more, or are you standing still, hoping the world doesn't notice? Here's the fourth law, and it's a hard one to swallow, so brace yourself. It's the law of responsibility. Nobody is coming to save you. Not the government, not your boss, not your family, not a stroke of luck. Help might come. Support might come. but rescue. The kind where someone else builds your life for you while you wait. That's not coming. And waiting for it is the surest way to waste the only life you're going to get. This isn't meant to be cold. It's meant to be freeing. Because once you accept that no one is coming to save you, you stop waiting, and waiting is the most expensive habit a human being can have. It costs you years. It costs you opportunities. It costs you the version of yourself you could have become 5 years ago if you'd started instead of waited. Now here's the fifth law, and it's about discipline, but not the way most people think of discipline. Most people think discipline means forcing yourself to do something you hate. That's not it. Real discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. That's the whole definition. What you want now might be comfort, a few extra hours of sleep, a purchase you can't really afford, an argument you'd rather avoid. What you want most is the life you keep saying you're working toward. And every single day, dozens of times a day, you are quietly choosing one over the other. Most people don't even notice they're choosing. They think these are neutral moments. They're not. They're the actual construction site of your future, happening in tiny, invisible decisions, one after another after another. Discipline gets a bad reputation because people imagine it as punishment. It isn't. Discipline is actually the shortest path to freedom, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Discipline in the short term purchases freedom in the long term. Indulgence in the short term purchases regret in the long term. Both are transactions. The only question is which currency you're willing to pay in, comfort now or freedom later. Now I want to give you the sixth law because it explains why some people take off while others with just as much talent stay flat for years. It's the law of environment. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you become like the books you read and the ideas you feed your mind. If your circle is full of people who complain, who settle, who mock ambition because it makes them uncomfortable with their own lack of it, you will slowly, without even noticing, start to think like them. This is why successful people are almost obsessive about what they let into their mind and who they let close to their life. It's not snobbery, it's self-preservation, because you cannot consistently outperform the environment you allow yourself to sit in. Look at the 5 people you talk to most. Are they stretching you or are they settling you? You don't have to abandon anyone dramatically, but you do have to be honest about which direction your circle is pulling you, because it is absolutely pulling you somewhere, whether you've noticed it or not. Let me give you the 7th and final law now, because it ties everything together. It's the law of the harvest timing. Most people quit right before the harvest, not because they were wrong about what they planted, but because they misjudged how long growth actually takes. A farmer doesn't plant corn on Monday and get angry it's not ready by Thursday. He understands the season. But most people planting a new habit, a new business, a new relationship, a new skill, expect a harvest on a timeline that doesn't match the actual season required. And when the harvest doesn't show up on their impatient schedule, they conclude the seed was bad or the whole idea was a mistake, and they rip it out of the ground right before it was about to break through the surface. That is, without question, the most heartbreaking way to fail. Not because the plan didn't work, but because you gave up on it one season too early. I want to talk about fear for a moment, because it deals with something almost nobody discusses honestly. Fear itself isn't the problem. The problem is what people do in response to it. Some feel fear and let it stop them completely. Others feel that exact same fear and use it as fuel to move carefully, but move anyway. The amount of fear a person feels before doing something significant is almost identical for everyone. The confident-looking entrepreneur and the person too scared to start a small side project both feel fear in their stomach before taking a risk. The difference isn't the presence of fear, it's the relationship each person has with it. And here's a pattern worth noticing in your own life if you're honest about it. The things you've been most afraid to do are usually connected to the things that would change your life the most if you did them. That's not a coincidence. Fear tends to guard the exact door that leads somewhere worth going. I've noticed something about people who stay poor and unhappy for their entire lives, and it's not laziness, even though that word gets thrown around carelessly. Most of them work extremely hard. The real problem isn't effort, it's direction. A person can row a boat with tremendous effort and still end up nowhere if they're rowing in circles, or worse, rowing against the current without realizing it. Effort without direction is just motion. It feels like progress because you're tired at the end of the day. But tired doesn't mean you move forward. The question was never, how hard are you working? The question is, working hard toward what, and is that direction actually going to take you somewhere you want to end up? I want to address something honestly, because you deserve honesty more than comfort tonight. Some of you have already tried. You've started the diet, started the business, started the budget, started the better habit, and it fell apart, maybe more than once. There's a temptation to conclude that this just isn't for you, that some people are built for this kind of life and you're not one of them. I want to challenge that thought directly. Falling off the path doesn't disqualify you from the path. It just means you're human, and every single person who eventually succeeded fell off more times than the people who never tried at all, because trying is the only way falling becomes possible in the first place. Falling isn't proof you can't do this. Falling is proof you were actually attempting something worth attempting. And almost everybody is waiting to feel ready before they begin, when readiness is manufactured through action, not achieved before it. You don't think your way into confidence. You act your way into it. So if you're waiting to feel ready before you start sowing better seeds, that feeling isn't coming first. It comes after you've already begun, as a reward for starting, not as a prerequisite for it. I want to leave you with something you can act on tonight. Most people never become wealthy and happy for one simple, repeatable reason. They keep choosing what's easy over what's necessary. They let their talents sit buried instead of put to work. They blame the harvest instead of examining the seed. They wait for permission or rescue that's never coming. They let their environment shape their thinking instead of shaping it on purpose. And they quit right before the season turns. None of that is a character flaw carved into their identity. It's a pattern. And patterns, unlike identity, can be changed. Starting today, starting this hour, starting with the very next decision you make after this message ends. I want to talk honestly about money for a moment, because people deserve directness. Money is not evil, and money is not the goal either. Money is simply an amplifier. It takes whoever you already are and makes more of it possible. If you're generous with little, you'll likely be generous with more. If you're wise with little, you'll likely be wise with more. But if you're reckless and undisciplined with little, money won't fix that. It will only give that recklessness a bigger stage to perform on. This is why so many people who come into sudden wealth lose it just as fast as they got it. The money changed, the person underneath it didn't. And it's the person underneath, not the number in the account, that ultimately decides whether wealth sticks around or slips through the fingers like sand, no matter how tightly you try to hold it. Here's something worth thinking about, and it's about the price of neglecting the people closest to you while chasing an ambition that was supposed to be for them in the first place. This is a trap many driven people fall into without noticing until real damage has already been done. They tell themselves they're working these long hours for their family, for their future, for the people they love. And there's truth in that. But somewhere along the way, ambition can quietly become its own reason for existing, disconnected from the people it was originally meant to serve. Wealth built on the wreckage of your closest relationships isn't wealth. It's an expensive kind of poverty wearing a nice suit. So as you apply everything we've talked about tonight, keep asking yourself who this is actually for, and make sure the people you love aren't paying a price you never intended to charge them. I want to close with a thought about legacy, because ultimately that's what all of this is really about. Not just your bank account, not just your happiness in this decade, but what you leave behind in the people who were watching you the whole time, whether you realize they were watching or not. Your children are watching how you handle difficulty. Your friends are watching how you handle success. Every law we've discussed tonight isn't just about your own wealth and your own happiness. It's about becoming the kind of person whose example quietly gives other people permission to build a better life too, simply by watching you do it first. Let me give you one more idea before we close, because it's about the difference between a wish and a decision. And most people confuse the two their entire lives. A wish is soft. A wish says, I hope things get better, and then waits passively to see what happens, the way you'd wait to see if it rains. A decision is a completely different animal. A decision closes doors on purpose. Or it says, this is what I'm doing now, and here's what I'm no longer willing to keep doing. And it doesn't leave room for the old pattern to quietly sneak back in through the side door. Most people who say they want a better life have only ever wished for one. They've never actually decided, because a real decision requires giving something up. And giving something up is uncomfortable, even when what you're giving up was never serving you. Wishing costs nothing, which is exactly why it produces nothing. Deciding costs something, which is exactly why it produces something in return. I think about the difference between the person who says, I'm trying to save money, and the person who says, I don't spend money on that anymore. The first sentence is soft, flexible, easily bent under pressure. The second sentence is a decision. It's already closed. There's no negotiation happening in the moment of temptation because the negotiation already happened earlier in a calmer moment when the decision was made once and for all instead of being relitigated every single day. This is why willpower alone fails so many people. Willpower has to be summoned fresh every time temptation shows up, and willpower gets tired just like everything else. A decision, once truly made, doesn't need to be summoned again. It's just the new default, the new normal, the new baseline from which everything else gets built. I want to address the quiet fear a lot of people feel, but rarely say out loud, which is the fear that maybe it's simply too late for them. They're too old to start over, too far behind to catch up, too many years already spent drifting to make up the difference now. I understand why that fear shows up, but I want to challenge it directly because it's built on a false comparison. You're not competing against the person who started 20 years ago with more time on the clock. You're only ever competing against the version of yourself who does nothing different starting today. That's the only real competition that exists. 10 years from now is coming either way, whether you use this next decade well or waste it exactly like the last one. The only real question is which version of 10 years from now you'd rather be standing in. And it's genuinely never too late to start choosing that version instead of drifting toward the other one by default. Here's what I'd ask of you. Not next month, not next year, not after the holidays or after things settle down, because things never fully settle down. That's a myth people tell themselves to justify waiting. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take an honest inventory. What talent have you buried? What seed have you refused to plant? What small daily choice have you been making that you know deep down is quietly wrecking the harvest you say you want? You don't need to fix everything at once. Nobody does. You just need to plant one better seed tomorrow than you planted today, then another the day after. That's it. That's the whole secret. And it was never really a secret at all, just a discipline most people weren't willing to practice long enough to see it work. Because here's the last thing I'll leave you with. Life is short. It moves faster than anyone believes while they're young, and slower than anyone can bear once they're looking back with regret. So whatever you're going to build, whatever life you say you want, wealthy, happy, whichever one you're chasing, or both, because they were never really separate, you have to start, not with a leap, with a seed planted today. Don't bury it in the ground out of fear like that third worker did. Put it to work. Because 10 years from now, you will arrive somewhere no matter what. The only real question left tonight is this. Are you going to choose the direction, or are you going to let another 10 years happen to you the way the last 10 did? The choice, like it's always been, is entirely yours.